The morning sun barely pierced the thick Texas haze as Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport's Terminal C churned with the chaos of a Monday in 2025. Business travelers in pressed suits clutched overpriced coffee, their eyes glued to smartphones, buzzing with emails and stock tickers. Families wrestled with overstuffed suitcases, children trailing behind, like weary ducklings, while the air hung heavy with the scent of jet fuel sweat and the faint bitterness of stale pretzels from a nearby kiosk. The security checkpoint was a bottleneck of humanity, a relentless machine where passengers surrendered dignity alongside shoes, belts, and liquids in plastic bags. TSA agents moved with mechanical precision, their faces blank from years of processing travelers as inventory rather than individuals. Amid this controlled chaos, Samuel Carter, a 76-year-old Vietnam War veteran, navigated the crowd with a quiet grace that his age and experience had honed. His weathered hands, scarred from shrapnel decades ago, cradled a small velvet case, its faded exterior belying the treasures within a silver star for valor under fire. A Purple Heart earned when a grenade nearly ended him at 22, and a Bronze Star for saving a squad during a brutal ambush in the Mekong Delta. Each medal was engraved with the names of comrades who never made it home, a portable memorial to sacrifices that civilian eyes rarely recognized. Carter, once a Pentagon advisor, whose work shaped defense policy for 3 administrations, carried himself with the dignity of someone who had seen wars cost and bureaucracies wait. His gray eyes, sharp, despite the years, scanned the checkpoint with the patience of a man who had survived both jungle firefights and Washington's political trenches. To the hurried crowd, he was just another elderly man, unremarkable in his worn blazer and polished shoes, but his presence carried a history that transcended the airport's sterile efficiency. At the front of the security line, TSA agent Derek Lawson, a 32-year-old with 5 years on the job, processed passengers with the detached efficiency of a factory worker. His Navy uniform was crisp, but his demeanor was frayed, worn down by endless shifts of repetitive scans and complaints. To Lawson, the travelers were a blur of IDs and belongings, each a potential delay in his routine. When Carter approached, his slow, deliberate steps drew Lawson's impatience. "Sir, step forward. Place all items in the tray." Lawson barked, his voice carrying the rote authority of a government badge. Carter complied, gently placing the velvet case on the conveyor belt, his fingers lingering as if reluctant to let it go. "Agent, this case contains military decorations from my service in Vietnam." Carter said, his voice steady but firm, carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being heard. "Please, handle them with care." Lawson's eyes flicked to the case, then to Carter, his expression hardening with a prejudice born of countless encounters with travelers claiming special status. "Military decorations, huh?" he said, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Let's see what you've got." He opened the case with a casual flick, revealing the gleaming medals nestled in faded satin, their engravings catching the fluorescent light. To Carter, they were sacred. To Lawson, they were just another item to clear. "Sir, airport regulations apply to everyone," Lawson said, his voice louder now, as if asserting dominance over the line of passengers waiting behind. "These could be anything: concealed weapons, maybe dressed up as military props. I've seen it before." The accusation stung, but Carter's face remained composed, his years as a combat medic and Pentagon liaison teaching him to weather disrespect with restraint. "Agent Lawson," he said, reading the name tag, "those medals were earned saving lives under fire. They're engraved with the names of men who didn't come home. I'm asking for basic respect." Lawson's response was a smirk, his confidence bolstered by the badge and the line of travelers watching. "Look, Grandpa, "I don't have time for war stories from the Stone Age," he said, his words cutting through the hum of the checkpoint. "These look like cheap trinkets from some surplus store, probably bought to impress folks at a bar." The crowd shifted uncomfortably, some passengers glancing at Carter, others at their phones unwilling to intervene. Carter's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm, a product of discipline forged in chaos. "Agent, those decorations represent sacrifices you can't imagine," he said. "They're not trinkets. They're proof of service that protects the systems you work for." Lawson, emboldened by the lack of immediate challenge, picked up the case and turned it over, letting the medals clink against each other. "Service doesn't get you a free pass through security," he said, his tone now openly mocking. "Everyone's equal here, and these don't look like anything special." The words landed like a slap, but Carter's composure held his eyes locking onto Lawson's with an intensity that hinted at the battles he'd fought, both on the battlefield and in Washington's halls. A nearby passenger, a young woman with a backpack, began filming discreetly, her phone capturing the exchange as Lawson's arrogance grew. "Maybe your supervisor could clarify proper protocol for handling military honors." Carter suggested, his voice low, but carrying an edge that suggested he was no ordinary traveler. Lawson scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "My supervisor's got better things to do than deal with entitled old guys who think they're above the rules," he said. "These are going in the bin unless you can prove they're not junk." Without waiting for a response, Lawson turned and tossed the velvet case into a nearby trash bin, the medals landing with a dull thud among crumpled coffee cups and discarded boarding passes. The act was a violation so brazen it silenced the nearby crowd, a collective gasp rippling through the line. Carter stood frozen, his hands trembling slightly as decades of sacrifice were reduced to garbage in an instant. The engravings' names, like Tommy Reynolds, who died in his arms, and Michael Chen, who took a bullet meant for him, were now buried in trash, their memory desecrated by a man whose authority came from a system Carter had helped build. "Agent Lawson," Carter said, his voice steady, despite the rage simmering beneath. "You've just thrown away honors earned in blood. That was a mistake, and it will have consequences you can't imagine." Lawson rolled his eyes, mistaking Carter's calm for weakness. "Sir, move along before I call backup for causing a disturbance," he said, turning to the next passenger as if nothing had happened. Next in line, but Carter didn't move. He reached for his phone, his fingers steady as he scrolled to a contact labeled Whitaker E., Senator Emily Whitaker, a former colleague from his Pentagon days and a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. As he dialed, the young woman filming zoomed in, capturing the quiet determination in Carter's face as he spoke. "Emily, it's Sam Carter. I'm at DFW Terminal C. A TSA agent just threw my Vietnam medals in the trash, called them fake. His name's Derek Lawson. I need you to know." The call was brief, but its impact was immediate, setting in motion a chain of events that Lawson's training could never have prepared him for. The checkpoint continued its relentless pace, but a shift was occurring, subtle, yet seismic. Passengers whispered, some pulling out phones to record or text, while others stared at Carter, sensing something extraordinary in his quiet resolve. The young woman's video, now uploaded to X, began to spread its caption, reading TSA agent trashes Vietnam vets medals at DFW. "This is wrong." Lawson, oblivious to the growing storm, processed the next traveler with the same bored efficiency, unaware that Carter's call had reached Washington, where networks forged over decades were already mobilizing. Carter stood to the side, his eyes fixed on the trash bin, the weight of his medals loss heavy, but his resolve unbroken. He had faced worse enemy fire, political betrayals, the loss of friends, but this moment, this casual disrespect, cut deeper than shrapnel. It wasn't just about him. It was about Tommy Michael and the others whose names were now buried in refuse. The airport's hum continued, but for Carter, it was the calm before a storm he knew was coming, one that would shake the foundations of Lawson's small world. As he waited, a janitor approached the bin, pausing when he saw Carter's gaze. "Sir, you okay?" the janitor asked, his voice kind but cautious. Carter nodded, his voice soft but resolute. "Not yet, but I will be," he said. "Someone's going to answer for this." The janitor hesitated, then moved on, sensing something larger at play. Carter's phone buzzed with a text from Whitaker on it. "Stay put. This ends now." The wheels were turning, and Lawson, still barking orders at the checkpoint, had no idea that his routine act of disrespect had just ignited a firestorm that would consume his career and expose the cracks in a system that had failed to honor those it was meant to serve. The hum of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport's Terminal C was a distant roar in Samuel Carter's ears as he stood near the security checkpoint, his gaze fixed on the trash bin where his Vietnam War medals lay discarded among crumpled napkins and empty water bottles. The morning chaos continued. Unabated business travelers shuffled through lines, their impatience palpable, while families wrestled with strollers and overstuffed bags. The fluorescent lights cast a sterile glow, amplifying the sense of detachment that permeated the scene. Carter, a 76-year-old Vietnam veteran and former Pentagon advisor, clutched his phone, the weight of his call to Senator Emily Whitaker still settling in his chest. His weathered face, etched with lines from decades of service, remained composed, but his gray eyes burned with a quiet fury. The medals, Silver Star, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, were more than metal. They were etched with the names of fallen comrades, each a testament to sacrifices made in the sweltering jungles of the Mekong Delta. Their desecration by TSA agent Derek Lawson, who had dismissed them as cheap trinkets, was not just a personal affront, but an insult to the memory of men who never returned. Carter's call to Whitaker, a trusted ally from his Pentagon days, had been brief but deliberate, a spark that was now igniting a firestorm beyond the airport's walls. As he waited, the young woman who had filmed Lawson's act of disrespect uploaded her video to X, its caption, "TSA agent trashes Vietnam vets' medals at DFW. This is wrong," spreading like wildfire across the platform. The post was already garnering hundreds of retweets, with comments ranging from outrage to demands for accountability. Carter, unaware of the viral spread, stood resolute, his years as a combat medic and congressional liaison teaching him that true power moved quietly through networks built on trust and shared sacrifice. In Washington, D.C., Senator Emily Whitaker sat in a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing, her attention divided between a discussion on defense appropriations and the buzzing phone in her pocket. When she saw Carter's name flash on the screen, she excused herself, stepping into the marble-lined corridor of the Hart Senate office building. "Sam, what's going on?" she asked, her voice sharp with concern. Carter's measured tone recounted the incident, Lawson's mockery, the medal's disposal, the casual disregard for a veteran's dignity. Whitaker's face tightened, her years working with Carter on military policy flooding back. He wasn't just a veteran. He was a man whose testimony had shaped veteran healthcare reforms, whose counsel had guided 3 defense secretaries, whose Rolodex held direct lines to half the Pentagon's top brass. "He threw your medals in the trash," she repeated, her voice rising with disbelief. "Sam, this is beyond unacceptable. I'm on it." Hanging up, Whitaker dialed her chief of staff, directing immediate action. "Get me Colonel Marcus Reed at the Pentagon's Congressional Liaison Office, and alert the committee chair this is a veteran dignity issue and we're not letting it slide." Within minutes, the machinery of Washington's defense establishment began to turn a network of loyalty and obligation that Lawson, still barking orders at the DFW checkpoint, could not fathom. Back at the airport, Lawson processed passengers with the same mechanical efficiency, oblivious to the storm gathering around him. His Navy TSA uniform gave him authority over the checkpoint, but it couldn't shield him from the consequences of his actions. Next in line, he shouted, waving a harried businessman forward. To Lawson, Carter was just another inconvenience, an old man clinging to outdated notions of privilege. He hadn't noticed the young woman's video now trending on X with thousands of views, or the whispers among passengers who had witnessed the incident. A middle-aged man in a pilot's uniform waiting nearby approached Carter cautiously. "Sir, I saw what happened," he said, his voice low. "That wasn't right. Can I help?" Carter offered a faint smile, his composure unshaken. "Thank you, son, but help's already on the way," he said, his tone carrying the weight of someone who knew how power moved. The pilot nodded, stepping back, but his phone was out, texting colleagues about the incident. The video's reach was growing, with local news outlets in Dallas picking up the story, their reporters already en route to the airport. Hashtags like #RespectOurVets and #DFW Disgrace began trending, amplifying the public's outrage. Carter, still standing near the checkpoint, felt his phone buzz again, a text from Colonel Marcus Reed. "Sam, I'm coordinating with Whitaker. We're shutting this down. Stay put." In the Pentagon, Colonel Reed, a congressional liaison officer with a reputation for cutting through bureaucratic red tape, was already on the phone with DFW's airport operations manager. His office, lined with photos of military ceremonies, buzzed with urgency as he relayed Carter's account. "This is a federal employee disrespecting a decorated veteran's combat honors," Reed said, his voice clipped. "Those medals were earned saving lives in Vietnam. You're looking at a congressional inquiry if this isn't addressed immediately." The operations manager, caught off guard, promised to investigate, but Reed wasn't satisfied. "You don't investigate when a hero's dignity is trashed," he said. "You act." He hung up and dialed Whitaker's office, confirming that a team was en route to DFW. Meanwhile, Whitaker contacted two colleagues on the Armed Services Committee, Senators James Holt and Maria Delgado, both of whom had worked with Carter during his Pentagon tenure. "We're going to DFW," Whitaker told them. "This isn't just about Sam, it's about every veteran who's ever been disrespected." The senators agreed, their staff scrambling to arrange travel and alert the media. The incident was no longer a local airport issue. It was a federal crisis, with Carter's quiet call triggering a response that would ripple through the highest levels of government. At the airport, the atmosphere was shifting. Passengers, sensing something unusual, lingered near the checkpoint, their phones capturing snippets of the unfolding drama. Lawson, still unaware of the video's viral spread, noticed the growing crowd and snapped, "Keep moving, people. This isn't a show." But it was a show, one he had unwittingly scripted. A local news van pulled into the airport's arrivals area, its crew rushing toward Terminal C. The young woman who had filmed the incident, now identified on X as Mia Torres, a college student traveling home, was live tweeting updates, her follower count skyrocketing. "This vet deserves better," she posted, attaching a photo of Carter's stoic expression as he stood near the trash bin. The image struck a chord shared thousands of times, alongside comments like, "Shame on TSA," and "Honor our heroes." Carter, meanwhile, received another text from Whitaker teams on the way. "Media's picking this up. Hold tight." He nodded to himself, his years in Washington teaching him that justice, when it came, moved swiftly through the right channels. He glanced at the trash bin, the pain of his medal's loss tempered by the knowledge that Lawson's actions had awakened a sleeping giant. Lawson, still processing passengers, began to sense the shift. A supervisor alerted by the operations manager approached the checkpoint, her face tense. "Derek, step aside," she said, her voice low but urgent. "We've got a situation." Lawson frowned, his confidence faltering. "What situation? Just some old guy making a fuss about his fake medals," he said, doubling down. The supervisor's eyes narrowed. "You threw a veteran's medals in the trash. Are you out of your mind?" Before Lawson could respond, a group of airport police arrived, their radios crackling with orders from higher up. The crowd parted as a local reporter, microphone in hand, pushed through her camera operator, filming the scene. "Sir, are you the veteran whose medals were discarded?" she asked Carter, who turned to face her, his dignity intact. "I'm Samuel Carter," he said simply. "Those medals were earned in Vietnam, saving lives. They carried the names of men who didn't make it home. Your agent threw them away." The reporter's eyes widened, sensing a story that would dominate the evening news. Lawson, now isolated at the checkpoint, felt the weight of eyes on him, passengers, colleagues, cameras. His badge, once a shield, felt like a target. In Washington, the Senate Armed Services Committee room was abuzz as Whitaker briefed her colleagues. "This isn't just about one agent," she said. "It's about a system that lets this happen. Sam Carter's a hero, and we're going to make this right." Holt and Delgado nodded, their staff drafting statements for the press. The Pentagon's liaison office, meanwhile, was compiling a dossier on Carter's service, his Silver Star, for dragging a wounded soldier to safety under fire, his Purple Heart from a grenade blast that left scars. He still carried his Bronze Star for leading a rescue in a burning village. Reed sent the file to Whitaker along with a note. "This is bigger than DFW. We need TSA reform." Back at the airport, the operations manager received a call from Whitaker's office. The voice on the line, unequivocal. "You've got a congressional delegation inbound. Shut down Terminal C's checkpoint until they arrive. This is a veteran dignity violation, and we're treating it as a federal incident." The manager, sweating under the pressure, relayed the order, and the checkpoint scanners went silent, stranding hundreds of passengers. Lawson, now sidelined, watched in confusion as his world unraveled, the consequences of his actions closing in faster than he could comprehend. Carter, standing quietly, felt the tide turning, his faith in the system he'd served, reaffirmed by the swift response of those who knew the true cost of his medals. The Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport's Terminal C had transformed from a bustling hub into a frozen tableau of tension by mid-morning, the security checkpoint, now a silent epicenter of a growing storm. The conveyor belts stood still, their scanners dark as airport police cordoned off the area under orders from a congressional directive relayed through the operations manager. Passengers stranded in snaking lines murmured in confusion and frustration, their phones buzzing with notifications as the viral video of TSA agent Derek Lawson discarding Samuel Carter's Vietnam War medals racked up millions of views on X. The hashtags @RespectOurVets and #DFW_disgrace trended nationwide, with comments ranging from heartbroken tributes to furious calls for Lawson's termination. Samuel Carter, the 76-year-old veteran at the heart of the incident, stood near the cordoned-off trash bin, where his Silver Star, Purple Heart, and Bronze Star lay buried among discarded coffee cups. His weathered face etched with the scars of war and the wisdom of decades as a Pentagon advisor remained composed, but his gray eyes held a quiet intensity. The medals engraved with the names of fallen comrades like Tommy Reynolds and Michael Chen were more than decorations. They were a covenant with the past, a promise to carry the memory of those who never returned. Carter's call to Senator Emily Whitaker had unleashed a response that was now converging on the airport, a coalition of congressional and Pentagon forces moving with the precision of a military operation. The air was thick with anticipation, the scent of jet fuel and stale pretzels now overlaid with the electric hum of media presence as news vans crowded the arrivals area, their cameras trained on Terminal C. Senator Whitaker, flanked by Senators James Holt and Maria Delgado, stepped off a private jet at DFW, their faces grim as they navigated the terminal with a small entourage of staffers. Whitaker, a formidable figure on the Senate Armed Services Committee, had known Carter since their days collaborating on veteran health care reforms. Her tailored suit and steely demeanor contrasted with the chaos around her, but her focus was singular justice for a hero whose dignity had been trampled. Holt, a former Marine, and Delgado, a vocal advocate for military families, shared her outrage, their presence amplifying the weight of congressional authority descending on the airport. As they approached Terminal C, a local news anchor intercepted them, her microphone thrust forward. "Senator Whitaker, can you comment on the incident involving a Vietnam veteran's medals?" Whitaker's voice was steady, cutting through the din. "We're here because a federal employee disrespected a decorated veteran, Samuel Carter, whose service in Vietnam and the Pentagon shaped this nation's defense. Throwing his medals in the trash isn't just a personal insult, it's a betrayal of every veteran. We're demanding answers and accountability." The cameras rolled, broadcasting her words live to a nation already gripped by the story. Back at the checkpoint, Carter stood quietly, his hands clasped, as passengers whispered and pointed, some offering nods of respect. The young woman who had filmed the incident, Mia Torres, was now speaking to a reporter, her phone still in hand, as she described Lawson's callous act. "He didn't even look at the medals," she said, her voice trembling. "He just threw them away like they were nothing." Derek Lawson, now isolated near the checkpoint's edge, felt the weight of scrutiny bearing down. His Navy TSA uniform, once a symbol of authority, now felt like a liability. His supervisor, Karen Mitchell, stood nearby, her face pale as she fielded calls from airport management. "Derek, what were you thinking?" she hissed, her voice low but sharp. "Do you have any idea who that man is?" Lawson, his confidence eroding, shrugged defensively. "I was following protocol. Suspicious items get inspected. Those medals looked like cheap replicas." "How was I supposed to know?" Mitchell's eyes narrowed. "You didn't ask. You didn't care. And now we've got Congress and the Pentagon breathing down our necks." Lawson's stomach churned as he glanced at Carter, who met his gaze with a calm that unnerved him. The supervisor's radio crackled with an order, "Clear the area for a congressional delegation." Lawson's heart sank as he realized the scope of his mistake, but his training offered no playbook for this. He had dismissed Carter as an entitled old man, unaware of the network of power and loyalty that man commanded. The crowd parted as Whitaker, Holt, and Delgado entered their presence, commanding silence. Whitaker's eyes locked onto Lawson. "Agent Lawson," she said, her voice carrying the weight of her office, "you discarded combat medals belonging to you, Samuel Carter, a Vietnam hero and former Pentagon advisor. Explain yourself." Lawson stammered, his earlier bravado crumbling under congressional scrutiny. "Ma'am, I was following TSA protocols for unidentified objects," he said, his voice unsteady. "They could have been a security risk." "I didn't know." Holt cut him off, his Marine background evident in his sharp tone. "You didn't know because you didn't bother to find out. Those medals were earned, saving lives under fire. You called them trinkets and threw them in the trash. That's not protocol, that's disrespect." Delgado stepped forward, her voice softer, but no less piercing. "Mr. Carter's service protected the freedoms you enforce. Your actions dishonored that sacrifice." Lawson's face flushed, the cameras capturing his discomfort, as reporters scribbled notes. Carter, standing nearby, spoke for the first time, his voice steady but laden with emotion. Senators. Those medals carried the names of men I couldn't save: Tommy Reynolds, who died in my arms; Michael Chen, who took a bullet for me. They were my brothers. Agent Lawson didn't just throw away metal, he threw away their memory. The crowd fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the terminal. Mia Torres, still filming, captured the moment, her live stream now watched by thousands. A reporter asked Carter to elaborate, and he reached into his jacket, producing a worn letter, its edges frayed from years of handling. "This is from Tommy's mother," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "She wrote to thank me for trying to save her son. I carried it with my medals. It was in that case, too, when Agent Lawson threw it away." The revelation hit like a shockwave. Whitaker's face hardened, and she turned to the airport operations manager, who had just arrived, sweating under the pressure. "Where are those medals now?" she demanded. The manager, flustered, gestured to the trash bin still cordoned off. "We haven't touched it per your office's orders," he said. Whitaker nodded to an aide who retrieved the velvet case, its satin interior stained, but the medals intact. She handed it to Carter, who accepted it with a nod, his fingers tracing the engravings, as if reconnecting with old friends. The crowd erupted in applause, some passengers wiping tears, but Carter's expression remained solemn. "This isn't about me," he said to the reporters. "It's about a system that lets this happen to veterans every day, small indignities that add up. I was lucky to have friends in high places. Most don't." His words, broadcast live, struck a chord, fueling the viral outrage. On X, posts multiplied with veteran organizations like the American Legion and VFW demanding TSA reform. A Pentagon liaison, Colonel Marcus Reed, arrived shortly after his uniform, a stark contrast to the civilian chaos. He approached Carter, clasping his shoulder. "Sam, we've got this," he said. "The Pentagon's launching a formal investigation. This ends today." Lawson, now under escort by airport police, watched as his career unraveled. Mitchell, his supervisor, was grilled by Reed about TSA training protocols. "Do your agents receive any education on military honors?" Reed asked, his tone clipped. Mitchell hesitated. "It's not specific. We focus on security risks, not medals." Reed's jaw tightened. "That's the problem. You're trained to see threats, not heroes." The confrontation drew more cameras, with national networks like CNN and Fox News interrupting broadcasts to cover the DFW medal incident. Carter's story was no longer local. It was a national reckoning, exposing systemic failures in how federal employees treated veterans. Whitaker addressed the growing media scrum, her voice resolute. "This incident reveals a gap in TSA training that dishonors those who've served. We're calling for a congressional hearing to investigate and ensure this never happens again." Holt added, "Samuel Carter's medals represent sacrifice most of us can't imagine. We owe him and every veteran better." Delgado, turning to Carter, asked Mr. Carter, "What do you want to see happen?" Carter paused, the letter from Tommy's mother still in his hand. "I want veterans to walk through airports without fear of being disrespected," he said. "I want their sacrifices to mean something to the people who serve them." The terminal remained shut down, passengers rerouted, as the congressional delegation and Pentagon officials coordinated with airport management. Lawson, now sequestered in a security office, faced questions from Reed and Mitchell, his earlier defiance replaced by panic. "I didn't know who he was," he repeated, but the excuse rang hollow. The viral video, now viewed over 5 million times, showed his casual cruelty in stark detail, leaving no room for justification. Mia Torres, interviewed by CNN, spoke passionately. I posted that video because I couldn't stay silent. That man's a hero, and he was treated like garbage. Her words echoed across social media, with veterans sharing their own stories of disrespect at airports, amplifying the call for change. Carter, meanwhile, stood with Whitaker and Reed, the recovered medals in his hand, but the weight of the incident still heavy. "This isn't over," he told them quietly. "Not until the system changes." Whitaker nodded. "It's not over, Sam. We're taking this to Washington." As the cameras rolled and the crowd watched, the storm that began with a single call was now a full-blown crisis, one that would force a reckoning for Lawson, the TSA, and a nation grappling with how it honors its heroes. The fallout from the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport incident had transformed Samuel Carter's personal indignity into a national reckoning by the following afternoon, with Terminal C still reeling from the congressional intervention that had halted operations. The viral video posted by college student Mia Torres had amassed over 10 million views on X, its raw footage of TSA agent Derek Lawson tossing Carter's Vietnam War medals into a trash bin, fueling a firestorm of outrage. Hashtags like #RespectOurVets and #DFW dominated social media, with veteran organizations, political commentators, and everyday citizens demanding accountability. News networks looped the clip, interspersing it with interviews from Carter, whose quiet dignity and storied past as a Vietnam combat medic and Pentagon advisor captivated the nation. The 76-year-old stood in a quiet corner of the airport, his velvet case of medals, Silver Star, Purple Heart, and Bronze Star, now recovered but bearing the stains of their brief sojourn in a trash bin. The engravings of his fallen comrades' names, Tommy Reynolds and Michael Chen, glinted under the terminal's fluorescent lights, a reminder of the sacrifices Lawson had dismissed as cheap trinkets. Carter's gray eyes, tempered by decades of war and bureaucracy, held a mix of resolve and weariness as he fielded calls from Senator Emily Whitaker and Colonel Marcus Reed, who were now orchestrating a broader response from Washington. The incident had exposed a fault line in how America treated its veterans, and the nation was watching, waiting for justice. In Washington, D.C., the Senate Armed Services Committee room buzzed with urgency as Whitaker, Holt, and Delgado prepared for an emergency hearing on TSA training failures. The room, lined with oak paneling and portraits of military leaders, was packed with staffers, reporters, and veteran advocates, the air thick with anticipation. Whitaker, her voice steady but fierce, opened the session. Yesterday at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, a federal employee disrespected a Vietnam hero, Samuel Carter, by discarding his combat medals as garbage. This isn't an isolated incident, it's a symptom of systemic failures in TSA training that we must address. Holt, his Marine background evident in his clipped delivery, added Carter's service saved lives in Vietnam and shaped defense policy for decades. He deserved respect, not humiliation. Delgado, addressing the growing media presence, emphasized the human cost. Those medals carried the names of fallen soldiers. When they were thrown away, so was their memory. We owe our veterans better. Carter, invited to testify, sat at the witness table, the recovered velvet case before him. His hands, scarred from shrapnel, rested calmly as he spoke. "I'm here not for myself, but for every veteran who's faced disrespect at an airport, a hospital, or a government office," he said, his voice steady but resonant. "My medals were recovered, but the letter from Tommy Reynolds' mother thanking me for trying to save her son is gone. That loss hurts more than I can say." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. A CNN correspondent, live streaming the hearing, noted the tears in several attendees' eyes, amplifying Carter's story to millions. Back at DFW, Derek Lawson sat in a sterile airport security office, his TSA badge confiscated as he faced a formal investigation. His Navy uniform hung loosely on his frame, a symbol of authority now stripped away. The operations manager, under pressure from congressional and Pentagon oversight, had suspended Lawson pending a review of his actions. "You didn't just violate protocol. You violated basic decency," the manager said, handing Lawson a notice of administrative action. Lawson's face was pale, his earlier defiance replaced by a dawning realization of his career's collapse. "I didn't know who he was," he muttered, but the excuse fell flat. The viral video, now dissected on every major news outlet, showed his casual cruelty in high definition, leaving no room for defense. Social media was merciless, with posts calling him the face of disrespect and demanding his termination. Veteran groups, including the Vietnam Veterans of America, issued statements condemning Lawson's actions and calling for comprehensive TSA reform. A petition on change.org titled "Justice for Samuel Carter" had garnered over 500,000 signatures, its comments filled with stories from other veterans who had faced similar indignities at airports. Lawson, scrolling through X on his phone, saw his name trending alongside words like shame, and fired his reputation crumbling in real time. Meanwhile, Carter's story was reshaping the national conversation. In Dallas, a crowd of local veterans gathered outside Terminal C, holding signs that read, "Honor our heroes," and "TSA must change." Mia Torres, the student whose video had sparked the movement, was invited to speak at a veteran rally organized by the American Legion. "I posted that video because I couldn't stay silent," she told the crowd, her voice amplified by a megaphone. "Mr. Carter's dignity was stolen, but we're giving it back by demanding change." The rally, broadcast live by local stations, drew thousands of supporters both in person and online, with #DFW disgrace evolving into #Veterans deserve better. Carter, invited to the rally, arrived to cheers his quiet presence, a stark contrast to the fervor around him. He took the microphone, his voice steady. "This isn't about one agent or one airport," he said. "It's about a system that forgets what veterans have given. Let's fix it, not for me, but for those who come after." The crowd roared, and Mia, standing nearby, handed Carter a printed copy of her viral post, now framed as a memento. "You inspired us all," she said, her eyes bright with admiration. Carter nodded, tucking the frame under his arm, his focus on the broader fight. In Washington, the TSA headquarters was in crisis mode, its leadership scrambling to respond to congressional pressure. The agency issued a public statement drafted under duress. "We deeply regret the incident at DFW and are conducting a thorough investigation. The TSA is committed to respecting our nation's veterans." But the statement posted to X was met with skepticism, with users replying, "Words aren't enough, fire. Lawson and train your agents." Whitaker, addressing the hearing, demanded more than apologies. "We need mandatory training on military honors, veteran sensitivity, and basic respect," she said. "This committee will oversee the implementation of these reforms." Reed, representing the Pentagon, submitted a report detailing Carter's service record, emphasizing his role in saving lives during Vietnam and shaping defense policy. "This man's medals were earned in blood," Reed told the committee. The TSA's failure to recognize that is a failure of leadership. The hearing concluded with a unanimous vote to launch a federal audit of TSA training programs, with Carter's testimony cited as the catalyst. News outlets from the New York Times to Fox News ran headlines like "Vietnam, Heroes Fight Sparks, TSA Overhaul," and "Congress Demands Justice for Veterans Disrespected Medals." Days later, Carter returned to DFW, invited by the airport to receive a formal apology. The operations manager, flanked by TSA officials, presented him with a restored velvet case, its satin cleaned and the medals polished. "Mr. Carter, we failed you," the manager said, his voice breaking. "We're implementing new training to ensure this never happens again." Carter accepted the case, his fingers tracing the engravings of Tommy and Michael's names. "Thank you," he said simply, "but make sure it's for all veterans, not just me." The ceremony, broadcast live, included a surprise. The local Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund announced a scholarship in Carter's name, funded by donations, inspired by Mia's video. Carter announced his own gesture. "I'm donating my Bronze Star to the Dallas Veterans Museum," he said, holding up the medal. "It's not about the medal. It's about the memory of those we lost." The crowd erupted in applause, and Whitaker, watching the broadcast from Washington, texted Carter, "You've changed the game, Sam. Proud of you." Lawson, meanwhile, faced the final blow. The TSA investigation concluded that his actions violated federal employee conduct standards, resulting in his termination. Alone in his apartment, he watched news reports of Carter's ceremony, his career in ruins. The ex-posts branding him a villain stung, but the stories of other veterans' humiliations haunted him more. He had been a cog in a system that failed to teach respect, and now he paid the price. Carter, back home, placed the framed ex-post from Mia on his mantle next to a photo of his Vietnam squad. The fight had been won, but the war for veteran dignity continued. As he looked at the medals now safe, he whispered, "For you, Tommy. For you, Michael." The nation watching began to listen.